Next, from the Senate floor at the state capitol, we hear a debate over Senate Bill 16, which will reform the state's education funding system. Supporters say the bill, sponsored by Democrat State Senator Andy Manar, would allocate about 90% of state dollars to schools based on district need. This runs about 30 minutes.
Senator Manar, to explain your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. This amendment is a gut and replace amendment. It becomes the bill along with corresponding amendments that are come after this. So let me go through what this amendment entails. First, it is the result of work that was performed by the Education Funding Advisory Committee, which was a bipartisan group that was set up to come up with an alternative course to the status quo in dealing with school funding and state aid distribution in our state. So the major departures from the status quo are, first, that we institute in this amendment and in the corresponding underlying bill an integrated funding formula that accounts for a local district's ability to pay or need as the predominant factor in how money is distributed to the 860 plus school districts in the state. We devise a weighting formula that is in line with not just peer states, but with other states in the country. This is a methodology that other states have moved to, and during our EFAC process, we sought to emulate the things that worked in other states and avoid things that didn't work in other states. And one of the things that was clear was that a weighting formula to assess at-risk students, students that have needs that cost more money to get to the same outcome, that is also included in this amendment. The amendment eliminates proration. It eliminates the Chicago Block Grant for the programs that exist in the budget today that are integrated into the formula. There is a hold harmless provision for the changes that are facilitated by the amendment. It's a little bit different than hold harmless provisions in the past. Both those districts that gain state funds under this amendment and those that lose see a phase-in over 4 years, where the fourth year the program would be completely phased in. And then finally, the effective date is July 1 of 2015. And that is my overview, Mr. President. I'd be happy to get into more specifics.
The question is, all those in favor of amendment number 3 to Senate Bill 16 will vote aye. Opposed, nay. The voting is open. Have all voted who wish? Have all voted who wish? Have all voted who wish? Take the record on that question. There are 33 ayes, 22 nays, none voting present. Amendment number 3 to Senate Bill 16 is adopted. Are there any further floor amendments approved for consideration?
Floor amendment number 4, offered by Senator Manar.
Senator Manar on amendment number 4.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to withdraw this amendment as well.
The amendment's withdrawn. Are there any further floor amendments approved for consideration?
Floor amendment number 5, offered by Senator Manar.
Senator Manar on floor amendment number 5.
Thank you, Mr. President. This amendment was, and I should have mentioned on Amendment 3, there were many things incorporated into that amendment that came from what I would describe as constructive criticism after this bill, Senate Bill 16, was filed during the first few days of April. This Amendment 5 is a continuation of that. So there's a couple of very important things in this amendment. First, it clarifies that the PTEL adjustment grants are included as part of the calculation of primary state aid to districts, and it also caps the loss of any district at $1,000 per student. Of course, that is phased in over any number of years, effective July 1 of 2015. It also corrects what I would describe as technical or drafting errors. But again, these were things that came to us as the debate came about in the executive committee in the Education Committee and with corresponding meetings with superintendents across the state. And I'd ask for the amendment's adoption.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor will say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The amendment is adopted. Are there any further floor amendments approved for consideration?
Floor amendment number 6, offered by Senator Manar.
Senator Manar on floor amendment number 6.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is the final amendment for the bill. This would make complete what I mentioned earlier, that there are programs that were pursuant to the EFAC report never designed to be included in a proposed primary state aid formula under a weighting system. Those are early childhood, special ed placements, and special ed transportation. This amendment would make the bill consistent with the model provided by EFAC in the report, and I would ask for the adoption of the amendment.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor will say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The amendment is adopted. Are there any further floor amendments approved for consideration?
No further amendments reported.
Third reading. Now in the order of third reading is Senate Bill 16. Mr. Secretary, please read the bill.
Senate Bill 16, an act concerning education. Third reading of the bill.
Senator Manar on your bill.
Thank you, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen of the body. I want to first begin by saying that I appreciate the work that nearly everyone in this chamber, from giving suggestions on this bill to attending hearings to traveling throughout the state in the past 9 months, the work, the ideas, the thought, the depth of this issue, all of those things that have come together that are now embodied in Senate Bill 16 with the corresponding amendments. I want to just say that this process began for me as a father when my children started the 2012 school year in Bunker Hill. And it dawned on me that my kids were in a very similar situation to kids across the state, not just in small rural districts, but in urban districts as well. And as a legislator, newly elected legislator, before I was sworn in, this bill became an idea or a thought to me when I had a meeting with superintendents, Senator McCarter and I actually had a meeting in the basement of Litchfield Hospital in a conference room, and those superintendents laid out for us the dire straits that their districts are in. And my knee-jerk reaction was, well, we need more money into the system, and more money into the system would solve their problem. But as you begin to peel layers back on how we distribute funds and all of the things and the criteria that go into this issue, it's no wonder it hasn't changed in 17 years. The state has changed dramatically in 17 years, but one thing that hasn't changed is the school code, the law that governs how billions of dollars are distributed from the state budget to hundreds of school districts in the state. So back to that meeting in Litchfield. I would say that I was wrong on one account. More money into the system today under the current funding formula is not going to solve the problems faced by the neediest districts in the state. We have a twofold process, and the first has to be changing the way distribution is handled by the state law, because we're still pumping money out the same way we were 17 years ago, and that actually doesn't even match the whole purpose of general state aid in the first place. The way we do it today actually exacerbates the inequity. It doesn't make it better. So SJR 32, which I believe was unanimous adoption by the Senate, instilled a bipartisan process. It was an open and transparent process. If you went to the State Board of Education's website, you would see any number of documents, from documents submitted by superintendents to reports from other states to nonpartisan groups weighing in. All of these things accumulated into a report that was issued on February 1st of this year, which was required by our resolution that we all supported in this chamber. And that report became the basis of Senate Bill 16. I want to commend and compliment Senator Luchtefeld for co-chairing that group. I appreciate the time and the effort that he and all 8 members, Republicans and Democrats in equal number, put forward that in my mind allowed us to be at this point today. So there's been effort beyond any that I've been involved in as a new legislator to come up with an alternative to the status quo. This is the status quo, and I'm going to use an extreme example. I mentioned some of the provisions in the bill, and then I think what I'll do, Mr. President, is pause and take questions. But I want to use this as an example, the most extreme I could find, but it's indicative of not just the path we're on, but the path we're going. And I want to compare East St. Louis, and I want to compare Arlington Heights. In East St. Louis, the tax rate is $7.49, 7.5%. With a 7.5% tax rate on the taxpayers in East St. Louis, $1,200 is raised per student. So 7.5% tax rate raises $1,200 per student with a 99% poverty rate. Compared to Arlington Heights, the tax rate is $1.84, a fraction of East St. Louis. With that $1.84 tax rate, $18,400 is raised per student, and the poverty rate is a quarter of that of East St. Louis at 26%. Now, on top of this disparity, which is, this is the root of what state aid is intended to serve, intended to get at, on top of this disparity, when you prorate general state aid, the reduction per student in East St. Louis is $935. In Arlington Heights, it's $58. That's the world we live in today. That's the world that we own. That's the world that's protected by the law today in the school code, and that's the world that we are seeking to change in Senate Bill 16. Now, I don't use this example to say one is better or one is worse, but I use this example as just empirical evidence that if our state aid formula doesn't account for this in some way to a greater degree, we should expect nothing different from public schools in Illinois. The status quo will continue to produce the status quo. That doesn't make us competitive as a state. It doesn't offer equal opportunity to students across the state, and we have to change that. And I believe Senate Bill 16 is a reasonable course at this point in time in the state. Senate Bill 16 doesn't spend an additional penny of money in the state budget. It doesn't call for raising the foundation level. It doesn't say let's go pump another $1 billion into schools. But it does say that regardless of how much or how little we have in any given year, how we distribute that money makes a difference. And it does matter. It matters to districts every day that struggle to keep doors open and offer things that are today luxuries that just a few years ago were not. The state has changed in 17 years, but the law that governs school funding has not. This is a reasonable approach, and it's based on the EFAC report, and I'd be happy to take any questions, Mr. President.
Is there any discussion? Senator Murphy, for what purpose do you rise?
To the bill, Mr. President.
To the bill.
The attack on the status quo is an interesting one. It's one we began in our caucus last year when the Speaker of the House said many of our districts were getting a free lunch. This after the 67% income tax hike sent a lot more of our money down to Springfield than we were sending before, and we knew we were primarily funding our schools with our own property tax dollars in my area, and I represent Arlington Heights, curiously enough. We know we spend most of our money locally. We raise most of our money locally. We're donor communities, have been for years, and we know it. But we highlighted some issues because the idea at the time, the Speaker said we were getting a free lunch because the CPS paid their own pension payments. What we identified at the time, first and foremost, was a disparity in funding. That's true. We discovered that the status quo had, in fact, morphed substantially from what it had intended to be into something totally different, into really a poor outcome. We also found that on net, the suburbs and downstate weren't getting a free lunch. We were paying for one. The Chicago Public Schools were getting $668 million more per year from state taxpayers than was their proportionate share. That's one of the things we found out. One of the other things we found out, how did everybody miss this for a dozen years? Senator, I'm pleased once your kids went to school that you finally decided after running these budgets for years that something needed to be changed. That's great, because for about 12 years, people in the districts all over this state were getting shorted with budgets that you put together for that majority, and the money was going to Chicago. Transparency. Nobody could figure it out for a dozen years. We had 3 funds within general state aid. 3 funds. Couldn't keep track of it. It was totally untransparent. This bill puts 10 in there. We couldn't keep track of 3, but 10 is more transparent. So this bill, on the one point, Chicago, which I'll get back to, on transparency, doesn't make it better, it makes it worse. The poverty formula. We had none other than President Pichard in committee saying, poverty is poverty. You shouldn't treat poor kids differently. Let me start out by accepting the premise that in a high concentration of poverty kids, that is more expensive. Current law, it's $3,000 per poor kid in a high-density poverty area. It's $314 in a low-poverty area. Under this bill, it goes up to about $4,800 down to $12. The grade school district in that rich area I live in has about 31% poverty. We get $12 a kid for everything we send down. Poverty disparity is widened by this, not narrowed. Transparency made worse. Poverty made worse. PTEL negligibly touched. These are the things we highlighted. Chicago Block Grant, it was out. We touted that. That was great. Unfortunately, he had to go by votes. Now it's effectively back in under a different name. Mandate relief. Man, everybody was excited about mandate relief. We had people on our side of the aisle ready to tell our superintendents, you know, they're going to stick it to you with this bill, but at least you're going to get mandate relief. Well, with Senate Bill 4 getting tubed, the lady from Maywood, I'm sure, is ecstatic, but the people who are looking for relief from mandates in Springfield and hope to offset what they're going to get cut in this bill, not so much. Nothing about Chicago TIFs. They can put all of their assessed value in TIFs, take it off the books, and we pay for it here. We have a broken system. That's true. That's why we did the homework last year, identified the problems, put bills out to address the specific issues. Transparency didn't get fixed. Poverty didn't get fixed. PTEL barely touched. Chicago? Oh, yeah. That's right. They were getting $668 million disproportionate before. Now that we have identified the problem, they're only getting about $630 million disproportionate per year. We are cementing the very disparity that started this whole analysis into law. And for those of you who represent suburbs, understand, they're taking it from your property taxpayers, and they're going to be asking you, what did you do to defend us in Park Ridge? What did you do to defend us in Schaumburg? What did you do to defend our property taxpayers? Because the only option is going to be for suburban property taxpayers to raise taxes. I know that may be part of your agenda. I'd be interested to see what the governor does with this bill if it makes it out of the House. The bottom line is the broken system continues. You have passed budgets since you took control of this chamber that skewed money away from your own districts into Chicago. You did it last year knowingly. You're going to do it again this year knowingly. We raised this. We gave you every opportunity. This is the proposal you come up with. You don't address any of the issues that were raised unless you make them worse. You continue and cement money disproportionate to CPS. That's not change. This is not a courageous attempt at reform. It's politics as usual wearing a reformer's mask. Chicago Public Schools gets theirs, the Senate sponsors district gets theirs, and most of the rest of us, frankly, get to go back to our property taxpayers and say, Springfield Democrats don't care how much you pay now, you need to pay more, or your kids will suffer. Ladies and gentlemen, this does not pass as reform. You can spend all the time you want on it, you can tell everybody how hard you worked on it. If the bottom line final product stinks, you vote it down. And this product stinks. I urge a no vote.
Senator Manar to close.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to first thank my colleagues for the robust debate on this bill. As I mentioned earlier, when the bill was filed, I requested criticism of the bill, knowing that this is a complicated issue, knowing that there were varying opinions about how to deal with it. So I appreciate that further criticism that was displayed during the debate on Senate Bill 16. I want to address a couple points that were made during the debate that I didn't have a chance to respond to. You would think from some of the rhetoric, some of the empty rhetoric that's happening in this chamber, that the status quo that we have today is pretty good. You would think that there is nothing wrong, perhaps, with how the law exercises itself every year on July 1st, or how the law dictates how funds, billions of dollars in funds, are distributed, and how the law is the protector of the inequality in the state today. It's the law that protects the inequality. So, judging by some of the debate, you might believe that we're pretty good today in Illinois. So I don't want anybody to think that the situation that we face today is anything but dire, that in my mind causes for a systemic change. This bill is not done. I acknowledge that. I acknowledge that to our caucus. I've acknowledged that to members on the Republican side of the aisle. But what it is a meaningful step forward, one that we need desperately in the state today. Proration. I couldn't agree more. Proration is probably the most devastating thing that has happened, especially when it comes to the inequality between the haves and the have-nots in the state. But you can't have it both ways. You can't complain about proration and at the same time not offer any way to fund the reversal of it. That costs $800 million, upwards of. I don't see that in anybody's budget plan today. Matter of fact, to the contrary, several years ago, Senate Republicans put out a reality check plan. In the first sentence under the State Board of Education budget, it says target reductions of $725 million to public education. That's the record. That is the record. The record isn't adding money to get rid of proration. The record isn't putting an alternative to the status quo on the table. The record is rhetoric, and today it's empty rhetoric. There was no criticism of the merits of this bill because the merits are founded on research and facts and things that were brought to us when we had our bipartisan hearings. Not mentioned is the fact that we go to a weighting system, a weighting system that recognizes where the needs are in the state, where there's poverty, where there's high concentrations of poverty, both of which are proven to cost more money for students that live in those conditions to get the same outcome as compared to students that don't. We weight bilingual education. We make it a form of doing business in Illinois because today 1 out of every 4 students comes from a bilingual household. That's different than 1997. That's a profound difference. And we make it a part of doing business because that's what we ought to do in Illinois today. Big difference. We get rid of the Chicago Block Grant. And I know that's a touchy subject, but we live under the same formula in this bill moving forward. And that's an accomplishment for our state. It's not a political accomplishment. It's not rhetoric that accomplishes anything. It just gets us to the same place as one state. And the idea that was mentioned several times that the formula has morphed over the years, that it has somehow changed and it tricked us as lawmakers. The problem isn't the formula has changed. The problem is that the formula hasn't changed at all, but the challenges that we face in the state when it comes to public schools have changed substantially. That's the basis of this bill. And one more thing, by the way, we haven't talked about. We would be the first state in the country that would offer additional money to students in school districts that enroll students in advanced placement, dual credit, and career readiness courses. That makes us more competitive as a state. It gets right at the heart of the issue of having employable people, students, graduate high school, especially in areas with high unemployment. We would be the first state to do that. Those are the good things in the bill. But one thing I want to close on is something that we haven't talked about much, and that is the effects of poverty in Illinois and the effects of poverty in public education in Illinois today. We don't talk about this enough in the Senate, in my opinion. And I've seen it firsthand where I lived. I've lived in the same place my entire life, and I don't need a statistic or a census data tract or anything to show me what I see with my own eyes. And I think there was a time in the state when poverty affected the view of a few legislators in this chamber and in the other, but those times are past. Poverty used to be more discriminate, if I could use that word, than it is today. Poverty's reach is far and it is wide in our state, and we don't equip our public schools with the resources necessary to attack that problem. There's no coincidence that in communities with the highest unemployment, we have the lowest achievement in public schools. So we can all acknowledge it, we can all realize that's the case, but we're not going to do any good for anybody if we don't change that. We have to drive resources to those places because poverty's reach has gone everywhere in Illinois, much different than 17 years ago. And whether you're a child that lives in southern Macoupin County, or you live in Englewood or Little Village or any city or community or small town or a farm, poverty's reach is drastic, and we have to deal with it. And the best way to do it is to equip children with the weapon of a world-class education. Our system isn't equipped to do it today because the law doesn't allow it. That causes me to say we need to change the law to get us there. That's how we will change these things. And in closing, many examples we could give from our prospective districts. And this is a difficult topic because the need arises to balance needs of a district with the needs of a state, and there's probably no other topic like this one when those two things intersect with each other. But surely, even if you don't represent a district that has a high prevalence of poverty or a high rate of unemployment, surely you can acknowledge that the reach of poverty affects your district indirectly. And those were the words of Dr. King. Those were his words. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. It affects the budget, it affects your taxes, it affects decisions we make in this chamber, and that has to change starting with public schools. You know, there are kids in Mulberry Grove in Bond County that will go 12 years of school without taking a single art class. That is reality today, not just for Mulberry Grove, but it's reality for districts across the state. That is what we own as a system in Illinois today. We own it. This legislature owns that. We should change it. There are children in the city of Chicago that walk out their door every day and they fear for their lives when they walk to school. Whether you're a downstate or you live in the suburbs, you should acknowledge that we need to change that, and that starts with changing how we direct funds and recognizing where our greatest needs are. There are children in Mount Carmel, I talked to that superintendent yesterday, that have opened up textbooks every day. Today, they went to school, opened up textbooks that are older than they are. They're going to learn science and history and math and all those things, by opening up a textbook that's older than they are. And that's because our funding formula doesn't account for the challenges in districts like that today. There's dozens of these. There's dozens of these. There's kids going to windowless rooms to learn. That's how much we value education, is we send kids to rooms without windows because we can't make tough choices and have courage to vote on a bill like this. That's got to change. This bill isn't going to get us all the way there. It is a major step forward in a process that is still going to unfold. There are changes that I would propose to this bill if I had time, but we don't have time. We have to move forward. We have to move forward in this session. I appreciate the debate, and I ask for an aye vote.
The question is, shall Senate Bill 16 pass? All those in favor will vote aye. Opposed, nay. The voting is open. Have all voted who wish? Have all voted who wish? Have all voted who wish? Take the record. On that question are 32 ayes, 19 nays, 6 voting present. Senate Bill 16, having received the required constitutional majority, is declared passed.
The Illinois Channel's coverage of the state legislature is underwritten by the Illinois Trial Lawyers Association.